One of the things that I'm curious about is just how you guys are innovating in the space, right? As you said that you're using the word primitives. Like, there's a lot of building blocks to like
Mm.
just before you do anything. Like, there's some things that just have to work.
Yeah.
You have to manage contacts and companies and so forth. But like, where do you find like, and you all have building your own independent companies, like where are the innovation arcs where you're like, and how do you balance just as sort of founders that are kind of, I got to build a lot of stuff that just has to work, because otherwise the CRM thing just the bar is so high. And then how do you manage? Where do you think the innovation arcs are for both of you guys?
Well, I'll probably speak for Patrick. I mean, like, I think probably both of us could probably say we didn't realize how much work was going to be involved in getting
Yeah.
to first base on a CRM, right? The amount of just stuff for table stakes is insane. So when people are like vibe coding on a weekend, I'm like, you knock yourself out, sweetheart. Have a good
Yeah.
time, right? So I think that so much of the work that we've done has been about thinking about this data layer, right? Of not just having a traditional relational database, but having a data lakehouse so that you're never throwing away data. I mean, one of the tenets we said from day one for us was you can't have good AI with bad data. So the problem that Salesforce, for example, has had with Agentforce in the sales world and support world, they've been fine because you've got a good knowledge base. You've got a knowledge repository. You've got a bunch of trouble tickets. You can do AI on that. You've got good data. You look at the average Sales Cloud instance and how crappy the data is in there, it's really hard to get good AI out of that. So part of that was first the premise of that, and then an agentic layer. To be honest, like the user interface is kind of an afterthought. Like, I'm a huge design person, user interface person, so it's hard for me to say, but like I just rebuilt our whole user interface last week, right? And we're going to roll out something new in the next few weeks, right? That's how easy it, and then we're going to test how easy it is to do it on our back end, because I think that's the future of CRMs is we're providing that context layer that you can effectively build your own CRM on top of something that scales.
Yeah, it was funny. Our original thesis, since about 2 years ago, was really twofold. One was this notion of like a headless CRM, right? Like a CRM that existed without a UI, right? And you can kind of think of this as what is that data contract? What is the API layer that you're engaging with? And then this was pre-MCP, and MCP is just another extension on top of this. And so we thought a lot about, hey, how would you interface? And this mostly comes from CDPs where they're fully headless, right? You're not logging into UI unless you're creating audiences. And then the other thing that we cared a lot about was this whole notion of data moving to tools like Snowflake, right? Which is this whole data lake architecture where, Snowflake was trying to pioneer things like, hey, how do you have like embedded applications where your data is not moving? And, we went and validated or tried to validate that market for us in order to actually go meet the needs of those customers. Those were mid-market enterprise organizations. There was just way too much stuff to build in order to get to market. So we kind of forced ourselves to go down market, work with SMBs while we continue to build the platform. But it does kind of correlate with some of the things that you're mentioning as well.
Do you think that having worked at working on Siebel, 25 years ago.
I didn't work on Siebel. I'm not that old.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I was referring to myself actually in that context. But then if you looked at, Siebel and then, looked at Salesforce, I mean, it really wasn't that much of a UI change. Like
Business model change.
it was a business model change, but it was the same, like, tabs just accessed sort of differently, one through a browser.
Yeah.
How are we going to be interfacing with this data set? Like, I mean, are we just chatting? Is that the primary interface? Or because, when I look at a lot of CRMs, for the most part, even the newer players,
Yeah.
they still look the same. There's some tables, there's some, tabs,
Some
maybe
boards.
it's moved, there's so what is the future interface?
I think there's a couple of things that you're highlighting. One is like, was there a business model disruption opportunity with the existing pricing model with existing CRMs, Salesforce namely? The second being, what are the things that need to hold true in this kind of AI first or 6, 12, 24 months from now? I think one thing that we care a lot about is, yes, we've spent a lot of time focusing on design, backgrounds in design and product management. It was like, what does the customer experience look like? But then you see people now connecting Clarify to Cloud Code via MCP, and a lot of the workflows are actually happening outside of the platform. So we know that, again, that goes back into the headless CRM argument of like, that's definitely important, something that we need to support. The other is really around AI being really good at generating code, right? So when you think about generative UI, it's something that I talk a lot about with the team, which is, there's UI that we maintain, but it's also really easy to actually feed a design system into our agent and have it actually then generate UI and experiences that then customers are interacting with. And so I think that is actually something that we'll transition to over the next like 6 to 12 months, where a lot of applications are actually being built by the agent for when humans need to interface with it, but the agent's actually controlling a lot of that versus us purposefully building a lot of those experiences. And you see that even today with Claude and Claude Artifacts, and a bunch of people adopting that even within the go-to-market motion. And then the business model side for us is we don't charge based off seats, right? Like if you think about Salesforce being the most expensive database that organizations use, right? And it effectively is the most expensive database. You're now regulated to buying seats for that database and getting access to that. My biggest frustration I had both at, primarily at Atlassian, because I didn't have a Salesforce license, they wouldn't pay for one for me, is that we actually had to take all that data, dump it in a Redshift, and I had to query it via SQL, which is not my my favorite job to be done there. And then even at Amplitude, about half the company didn't have access to it, and this is primarily a pricing issue. So for us, like we'd give the CRM away for free, and we charge for the work that's done on top of it, primarily by agents or AI.
Yeah. I think that is the right business model disruption. I think you and I have both posted about this recently, though, that I don't think any of us have gotten it right yet.
No.
And I think that like any new tectonic shift, right? We're in the early innings of AI. We're all just like the blind, it's the fable of the blind men and the elephant, kind of like trying to describe what this beast looks like. But I do think work output is the right model, and I do think effectively SaaS will be free, right? I think the core components are free and should be free, because you should be able to say, hey, so-and-so as a product manager doesn't need an expensive, per seat license, but still wants access to see what the customers are doing when they're thinking about new product features, et cetera. I do think that I'm not of the belief that we will just have an LLM prompt interface and that will be your CRM, because I think it's also people don't know what to ask, right? So I think that it's a very important part of that component. And as you said, we were the second CRM, I think, that went live with an MCP interface after HubSpot. Having that experience and that test bed is great, but people want to be able to be fed stuff as well as be able to pull it.
I think the interesting thing is the AI is going to get good enough at knowing and inferring what it thinks you should know, and then push the information to you.
Yeah.
So I do agree in the sense that, and this is even from my time at Amplitude, right? We built a analytics product where we expected people to know what to go ask, and we realized that people are just really bad at asking questions or understanding what questions to ask of their data. And then we try to figure out how to build more of an intelligent system that would push information to you, right?
Yep.
It would run analysis on top of your data set and actually give you insights, what we were considering at the time. I think AI is going to get really good, and what you're going to have, and this is, I think the challenge that, businesses are going to have is there's a signal to noise ratio. There's, if you have these systems just pushing you information, like what do you actually listen to? But I do think that it will get much more into a push-based model than a pull-based model where I'm extracting information.
Yeah, and I think you're going to basically wrap agents around those entities. So you'll have like a meeting agent, you'll have a deal agent, you'll have a rep agent, things like that. And so you just have these things that are running 24/7.
So does it mean? So right now, as companies are building their customer-facing forces, sales, SDRs, customer success, like what's this gonna look like in 5 years? I mean, are we gonna just have? I mean, how do we know when to hire a salesperson versus have agents do work? I mean, are agents going to start actually communicating autonomously with prospects? I mean, what do we think is this world? I mean, I think this is something a lot of people are concerned about, which is maybe the sort of people aspect. When you say people process tools, like what do you think's going to happen? Not that we can predict the future, but let's try it.
If we talk about like core values and principles, like one thing that I think about is like I'm not trying to reduce the number of jobs, right? I'm trying to basically provide people superpowers. So everyone that I want to use Clarify, like I want them to actually have a higher quota. Like instead of them hitting 4 or 5x quota, which is what we basically been benchmarking in SaaS, like how do I create a product that allows them to go crush 10x quota, right? And actually hit their numbers and do it quicker, easier.
But by design, that's less people, because previously if you had
more companies.
Or more companies, or and I guess this is a question. If I don't go to a founder and be like, hey, I'm going to actually give you a product that like requires you to hire less people. And I would be like, hey, I'm actually giving you a product that actually helps your seller sell more. Right? And for me, it's more of like the intrinsic value that I hope to create, like in the everyone's mission driven at the end of the day. Like, what mission do I want to have? And it's like, I want to help people. I want to help founders. I want to help help employees to do their job better, right, and crush it. And I think that's the hard part where, I think a lot of the outcome-based pricing models and primarily the tools in market today are reducing headcount. And you have a lot of folks right now who are worried about the state of the economy in 3 or 4 years because it's like, what's going to happen to all these low-skilled or non-skilled workers that were traditionally in support roles or other roles? Like, I do think AI is going to get to the point where it is replacing tasks that you would have had to use human labor for, right? And every technological shift that we've had, we've been able to overcome that, right? Same thing in farming when we had better process automation and tractors and everything else. Like cities exploded. We moved from a rural to more of a city-based environment. Like we'll have another technology shift happening right now, and I think we'll see kind of a drastic outcome from that. But for me, it's I guess I'm an optimist and not a pessimist is the easiest way to equate that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I think Mark Andreessen did this on a podcast recently where he's talking about we've gone from the Mad Men era where the secretary would come in and prep you for your meetings, like here's your calls and let me take notes of this stuff. We've now, then they would, when email came around, they would print out the emails and bring them to you. To now, actually, the work has shifted back to the individual, the manager or the executive, and effectively, we're taking some of those roles and they become agents for us. We now have, agents that sit in on meetings and take better meeting notes than we could ourselves. We have better follow-ups, better prep than we ever could ourselves. But those are tasks that have been shifted to something else, and those people have been deployed in different ways. So whether you 5x or 10x a company's revenue because you've made the reps more productive, or suddenly you just have a lot more smaller companies spawning, I think there's going to be an explosion in both of those ways.
Hey, this is Ben Kesnoka, co-founder of Village Global. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Village Global podcast, where we go deep on all of the biggest topics in tech. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to see you for the next one.